All right, we'll switch gears now to something else, Coyote.
Oh, absolutely. Just last week, you had the NNPCL GMD saying about the Port Harcourt Refinery that we were just wasting money. It wasn't delivering value. And this is coming after there was a lot of celebration around the Port Harcourt Refinery, the opening. Celebration, of course, went into controversy about whether it was blending or not. And things just dragged on. There was a temporary closure for maintenance. And people were wondering, I thought we just opened this refinery. Why are we maintaining it? But now it's been said by the NNPCL Group Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Bayo Ojulari, that we were just wasting money. The refineries were leaking value, and there was no clear line of sight on how those losses would ever turn into profit. So we thought, let's have this conversation. And we're joined on the program by Comrade Festus Osifo of a Trade Union Congress in Pengasyn. Comrade Osifo, thank you for your patience on the program. We had to deal with other important national issues, but it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Coyote. Good morning, Jeffrey. Nice to be with you.
Well, I don't know how that statement hits you. I know you've had to meet with the NNPC boss. You've done a lot of visits. You've spoken about this time and again. So does this come to you as a surprise, hearing that the Port Harcourt Refinery was just a waste of money? They were leaking value in the sense, and I'm talking about the general refineries in the country. Is that a surprise to you? Are you shocked?
No, Coyote. We weren't really shocked per se because we have been following the trajectory regarding the history of the Port Harcourt Refinery vis-a-vis the rehabilitation that was going on. So it wasn't really, it didn't really come as a shock to us. In fact, what is being proposed today has been the position of Pengasyn for close to 20 years. That has been the position of Pengasyn for about 20 years now. For you to run the refinery successfully, that what we must do is that we must bring about an LNG model. I remember in your program that over and over and over again, we've actually talked about the NLNG model. Even when the Mele Kyari's team, when they were rehabilitating the refinery, what we have said is that after the rehabilitation, that what you must do is that you must bring in technical partners who are refiners all over the world. It could be one, it could be two, for them to buy into the stake of the refinery so that government will reduce their shareholding in the refinery or their equity in the refinery to maximum 49%. And the investors, the core investors, will have 51%. So that in making decisions, there will not be politics politics will not be part of decision making of making the refinery functioning. So that has been our position. And today, from our conversation with Engineer Bayo Ojulari, he told us clearly that that advocacy that we have been advocating in the past years, that is the direction they want to go today. Really, in terms of the refinery losing value, yes. You know, what was actually done was the old Port Harcourt refinery. The new one was still under rehabilitation. The operating philosophy of the refinery before now is that you feed in crude into the old refinery and you also feed in crude into the new refinery. But at a point, the old refinery was not supposed to produce the final petroleum product. It is now supposed to feed into the new refinery that will now produce the final product. So having the old refinery functioning, it was, if you look at the material balance, what comes in and what goes out, it wasn't really profitable. Until the new refinery will start functioning, that is where you will see some level of profitability.
So exactly where are we with the refinery? As a matter of fact, I don't think any of them is functional now. I know that, I think he was being interviewed by Bloomberg, Engineer Ojulari, where he was asked straight questions as to the status of the refinery and what will be done. I know he mentioned in that conversation that I heard, selling it is on the table, but at that material point in time, there was no final decision. Now we're here where the alternative has to be to sell it, what maybe President Obasanjo tried to do, and now he's been vindicated that that was the right action. So you are an engineer, so you understand the technical workings of the refinery. The argument, so let me bring a layman's point of view. When it started, there were all kinds of shifting of timelines as to when the refinery would start operations. Eventually, we celebrated the onset of that refinery, and then the controversy ensued that it was blending using C5 and all of that. Well, for me, I described it as we gave you money to buy limousine, you went to buy us, you know, a smaller car. But mobility is still mobility, one way or the other. So help us understand what exactly is the state of, let's use one example, just one, Port Harcourt Refinery. Why did we get to the point where we say, no, as a government, this is way too much, we spend too much money?
Yes, Jeffrey, as of today, you can start the old Port Harcourt Refinery and it will function, all right? You can put it on today and it will function. But, you know, NNPCL as a company, NNPC Limited, they are there to make profit, all right? So the old Port Harcourt Refinery, if they want to start it today, maybe within the next 1 week, they can bring it back to life because it's been rehabilitated up to about 90%. But the challenge was that when you bring it to life, let's assume you feed in crude worth, let's say, $5 million into the refinery, the old Port Harcourt Refinery. What you are going to get at the other end when you sell the petroleum product will likely be maybe $4.5 million. So you feed in crude of $5 million input, then the output, you are getting $4.5 million as a product. The reason is because there are a lot of complexities that are in the old Port Harcourt Refinery in such a way that as of today, the product that comes out from it, it produces naphtha, it produces AGO, which is called diesel. It also produces kerosene, which is called DPK. So now you now need to take that naphtha and subject it to a lot of other activities to get PMS. So finally, in the material balance, when you feed in $5 million worth of material, you are going to get 4.5. So it was operating at a loss. Then that is the old one. Then the new Port Harcourt Refinery, as when the operation, everything was stopped, from what we were told by the contractor and those that were supposed to fix the refineries, and from our own assessment, it was between 70 to 80%, you know, brought back to life. As in, they were still on the phase of rehabilitation of the new one. So as of today, because I've listened to a lot of things in the press, as if the money that was thrown in is at a loss. No, really, it's not. Because if you look at the old Port Harcourt Refinery, they changed almost all the compressors, they fixed almost all the, the control room is the panels and all that, they were all changed, the turbines, they were all changed. So those things, the contractors are not taking them away. In fact, the value of the refinery today, if you value it today, it will be much more valuable today compared to the state that it was before the rehabilitation started. So what do I mean? If before, let's say in 2020, if you want to value the refinery, for example, it could be $3 or $4 million. But today, with the state that it is today, if you are to value it today, it could be valued for maybe somewhere around $8 to $9 million. These are just estimates. So what am I trying to say? That the money that was pumped in did not really go down the drain because it has actually brought back the refinery from 0% to maybe about 60, 70, 80% averagely today. So the new Port Harcourt refinery, you can switch it on.
Yes, yeah. My apologies. So I like your analogy because I want it to be as simple as possible for lay people who are not engineers. So the analogy of investing, just for an example, putting in a $5 million crude and getting out 4.5. What happened? Is it that, because I know that Mr. Ojulari had complained that one of the problems was to start operation without complete rehabilitation. Is that the problem? And if private investors are coming in to buy, what exactly are they buying?
Okay, thank you so much, Jeffrey. Yes, what Engineer Ojulari said is actually correct. The operating philosophy of the old Port Harcourt, of the Port Harcourt refinery, you know, there are two, the old and the new. So the old Port Harcourt refinery ought to feed, will serve as, it's not supposed to give the final product. It's supposed to still feed the new refinery. So it was a bit technically not correct for you to have started the old refinery as when it was started. The best engineering model was what was obtainable in the past. Get the two rehabilitated, start the two at the same time. So if you had started both of them at the same time, what would have happened was that we would have been producing PMS, because PMS is much more profitable when compared to DPK and DPK, naphtha and kerosene and AGO. It's much more profitable. So if you had rehabilitated both at the same time, then it could have been better off. But what they failed to do then, because probably they were under pressure. Okay, let's get the old one fixed while we'll still maintain a new one. Because the lead time of getting some of the parts in maintaining the new one was maybe like 3-4 years, much more. So they were like, okay, let's get the old one fixed while we still place our eyes on the new one. So that was actually what happened. So Engineer Ojulari, the GCO NNPC is actually also right, because what could have been done was, let's get both of them fixed at the same time, they start operation at the same time, in order to return back to the old philosophy, like you said. What are they actually buying? Yes, today, from what we understand, is not to sell to 100% stake in the refinery. We have said it over and over again, that the best model that should be brought to bear is equity sale. So you sell equity up to about 51%, just as it is applicable today in NLNG, where you have Shell, where you have ENI, popularly referred to as RGIP in the past. So where you have ENI, where you have Total Energies, the three of them combined, they have 51% stake in NLNG. Government has 49%. The reason is strategically important for government to have stake in a place like NLNG and the refinery is to guarantee energy security. So the refiner that they are currently talking to, from our understanding, is to get the majority stake in the refinery. And we have advocated for this for over 20 years. Because today in NLNG, if you want to make decision, if you are taking investment decision, which project are we going to invest in, all right? If you are saying, we want to do maintenance in NLNG, you don't need government to approve anything. Because the three private sector people, when they come together, they have 51%. Right. So when it comes to voting in the board, they have 51% vote. That means at every point in time, they can make commercial decisions. So this is actually what we've advocated for over the years. That allow, get the refinery up to a state, but you bring in qualified people, not to be sold to friends, not to be sold to cronies, not to be sold to people who does not have the wherewithal on how to get refinery to work. And we've advocated that go and bring people who have invested in refineries all over the world, people who knows how to maintain and how to operate refineries. You bring them in, sell minimum 51% equity to them, right, and allow them to come in and to run the refinery. Well, and that Osifo, is where we are headed to today.
There are a lot of people who believe that Nigeria was swindled with these refineries, the rehabilitation, the $3 billion crude loan, right, that was taken by the previous head and administration of the NNPCL, Melekiari. And I'm sure you followed some of the trends, the monies that have been spent. 2023, 2024, about 13 trillion naira was spent on those refineries. We're not even going into 2025, right? We've not seen the figures. So see the sheer money that was poured into it, and we hear that it's losing $500 million consistently. So a lot of people see that and say, wait a minute, is someone taking Nigeria and Nigerians for a ride? How can you spend that much money? A lot of them you're still repaying with crude, and we have literally nothing to show for it, because if your business is making a loss after all of that investment, it means that really, you wasted money in that sense. And I want you to speak to the role of Pengassan, because a lot of people have then looked back, said when OBJ wanted to sell 51%, Pengassan was against it. He did it anyway. But then Yaradua came and reversed it, and Pengassan rejoiced. And when it was time to begin to spend all this much money on the refineries, $3 billion, Pengassan kept quiet. So I wanted to speak to the role of the union. Seeing these things, do you frown at any action taken by the previous heads of NNPC in terms of rehabilitation that is not yielding as much?
Kayode, let it be on record, and I think I have appeared in this your station over and over again, where we have been shouting that the best thing to do in terms of our refinery is to bring about the NLNG model, whereby we don't want government to sell the refinery 100%. Because, okay, look at today, the Dangote refinery. So imagine if government has a stake up to 40% in the refinery. So what that means is that it goes a long way in guaranteeing some level of energy security. So what we have said is that, and I said for the past 20 years, if you calculate 20 years from today, is somewhere around 2006. I could remember when Peter Esele was the president of Pengassan, that was when we started advocating for bringing about the NLNG model in running the refinery. So clearly for us, it's been very clear to us because we have had a system that works. NLNG works. The arrangement we have in NLNG has been profitable, whereby dividends are turned to government year in, year out. So because that model had worked, we had advocated for that model over the years. They're coming down to what has been spent in the refinery without holding forth for NNPC, because, I mean, we are trade unions trying to push them and pressure them to get the refineries to work, but without holding forth. But our understanding is this. Kayode, you could have a car. So this particular car that you have had, you have parked your car for 5 years. And that car is, I mean, you cannot start it, you cannot move it, you know, the tires are all flat. If you value that car as 5 years ago, they could tell you that the salvage value of a car is about, let's say, ₦1 million. And somewhere down the line, you change the tires of a car, all right? You change the engines of a car. You panel beat the car and you respray the car. Then once you do that, the value, then let's assume that the final intention is to now get the car on the road. And you are starting it, now it's moving, but it cannot fire the way it ought to fire. So now, a car that was valued ₦1 million 5 years ago, as of today, when you bring buyers to look at that car is going to be valued maybe somewhere around 3-4 million. Because they are going to look at the tires. Oh, the tires are new, all right? The engine was just changed, you know, from maybe a 1995 model engine to a recent one. So the valuation will now be done based on the current state. So the car that was less valuable before is now much more valuable. So that is the eye, or that is the lens with which we will look at the state of refineries from. Remember, the rehabilitation was still ongoing. I mean, from the discussion with our members that are in that facility, the rehabilitation by Tekimo was still ongoing. The contract was not really terminated, but it was stopped and said, okay, let's do the evaluation. So the new Port Harcourt refinery, the contract is still running with Tekimo, who ought to fix it and bring it to limelight.
But Osifo,
from our estimation, it's not really a wastage as of today,
right,
but it's a continuous process. Yeah.
So the argument is, see, the money that was spent to rehabilitate the scrap vehicle in that sense could have been spent towards building another one, like a fresh refinery that we can then be sure that at least this refinery would operate, not the fixing of the scrap and painting it where you're driving and you realize that, oh, the injector is bad, you fix the injector, you drive a little bit, the headlamps is bad, you fix the headlamps, you drive a little bit, and you keep finding those challenges, which is what a lot of people have described this Port Harcourt refinery as particularly. So wouldn't that have made sense, really, to have pumped that money to build a new one? You mentioned the Dangote refinery. In fact, a lot of people have said, wouldn't it have been wiser for Pengassan, for example, to pitch your tent with Dangote refinery supported? Because obviously it was more viable, right, than these scrap refineries in that sense, that we're now spending more money just to boost the value. I hope you catch my drift, comrade.
Yes, Kayode, if you look at it clearly, the cost of building a refinery, okay, maybe you could ask Dangote, what was the cost of building the 650,000 barrels refinery?
It was about $20 billion.
He would tell you that clearly it wasn't $1.5 billion, for example, that was spent in Port Harcourt refinery.
No.
Or that is being spent currently.
$20 billion, comrade. But if you aggregate what has been spent on refurbishing, rehabilitating, turnaround maintenance of our refineries, comrade, believe me, aggregating them together between $10–15 billion, that will do a lot towards building a new refinery.
Okay, so as of today, aggregating what has been spent in the 3 refineries. Remember, the 3 refineries is about 450,000 barrels, all right? So aggregating what has been spent there in the last 10 years, I am not sure that it is up to $10 billion in any way. Because what was happening in the past, outside this recent rehabilitation, every single time you were hearing about turnaround maintenance, they'd never be cashed back. All you hear is just like road. You hear tomorrow, oh, government has awarded road between Warri and Port Harcourt. And at the end, they only release maybe like 5% of the value. And the other ones are never released. So from our estimation, we've had a lot of turnaround maintenances, but if you find out as an investigating journalist, you will discover that they've never really been cashed back. That it was more or less just a political gimmick. The only time you have in the last 15 years that you've really had those refineries being maintained how it ought to be is in the last 5 years from 2021 till date. So aggregate, what has gone in there, I don't think, and we don't also think from our estimation that it will go anywhere in building a new refinery. But we strongly believe that this refinery would work. We strongly believe with the right will, and having people, international partners who have operated refineries all over the world are coming in. The reason, not that we don't have people that have expertise in Nigeria, we have people who understand what to do. But the challenge is this: when you subject it to Nigerians, the problem we are having is the political interferences that do come every now and then. Remember, when those refineries were awarded, they went to Federal Executive Council. So naturally, look at NLNG. When they were about to build the current train that they are building, did you hear that it went to Federal Executive Council meeting? The answer was a no, it did not. And that is how businesses are run. You don't subject those kind of operations, most especially the refineries that have very tiny margins. You don't subject them to a lot of political considerations here and there. And that is why we have advocated in the last 20 years that bringing refiners to buy at least 51% equity in those refineries. We strongly believe that it will work. The refineries, yes, they've been brought to a very large extent to a position whereby with little push, they could work. And having these people come in to take at least 51% stake in the refinery is going to boost the operations and the maintenance of that refinery. And the Nigerian government would not carry all the weight alone anymore. And it will not be subjected to a lot of political gimmicks, political gymnastics, and political somersaults that we've had over the years.
Well, comrade, I still insist, looking at the figures, particularly the 9th Assembly, the House of Reps, just before this government came in, they put the figure that Nigeria has spent fixing the country's 3 moribund refineries in the past 10 years at that time at 11.35 trillion naira, which is in fact $25 billion. And they said that, there must be a probe. Although they were doing it, they were putting out the figure when they were leaving. But that is the official figure we have from Nigeria's parliament. So it's either you're saying they were lying, they don't have their figures correct, or indeed, they were correct.
Kayode, you've heard severally when the assemblies, they will shout, oh, that a particular government agency, there was a time they said NUPROC, that they were owing government, is it 20 or 30 trillion? So at the end of the day, what came out from it? So for me, those are still politics. Those are politics that I don't want to get myself involved in because I understand what goes on in that system. So for us, we are fixated in what the professionals are saying, not really what the politicians are saying, because that's laden with politics from our belief.
So you say that is not true.
$25 billion is huge.
So you don't think that is true?
I can boastfully say that that is completely wrong.
So what figure do you think is right then, comrade?
Yes. So, like as I have said, in the last years, okay, I have a friend that was employed in the refinery in 2007. He has been in the refinery since he was employed in NNPC. That is 19 years ago. So in our interrogation, he said that he has not seen any turnaround maintenance in that refinery until what started happening in 2021. So where we could tie government majorly is the last rehabilitation that I think Port Harcourt Refinery was about $1.5 billion, if my memory serves me right. For me, that is where we could start holding government. Every other one before then, if they had released money, I could tell you that that money never got to rehabilitate. That money never got to turning around the refinery. In fact, the refinery was actually shut down because of lack of maintenance. So if they've released money to the refinery in the last 10, 15 years, we won't have been where we are today. Maybe you can interview people that work in NNPC directly. They will tell you that for 20 years, they have never seen the level of work that they saw in the last 3 to 4 years, whereby if you go to Port Harcourt Refinery before this current maintenance was put on hold, you will see over 1,000 to 2,000 employees, contracting staff that are working there. People that are rehabilitating on a daily basis. You will see filter, you will see maintenance engineers, you will see welders, you see a lot of them working there. So that level of maintenance has never been seen in the last 20 years in that refinery. These are accounts of people that have worked in there day in, day out for the last 19 to 20 years. So every other one that you've heard, if we are doing calculation, it's just as if, like the East-West Road I've talked about, somebody could come and say, oh no, Obasanjo government awarded the road. Yaradua government did the same thing. Goodluck government, Buhari government, and now where are we still spending money? But if you do your studies and your findings, you are going to discover that when Obasanjo government actually awarded it, they may have awarded it and they may have announced, let's say, 200 billion naira. But over time, you will not realize that out of that 200 billion, maybe it's only 5 billion that was released. Then the next government will come, re-award it again, and give out maybe about 10%. But if we are to calculate, we will go back and see, okay, how much did Obasanjo government awarded? 200 billion. Jonathan government awarded it again, maybe with another 500 billion. We'll start adding them together, and it gives you that aggregate. But if you go down the money release, you will discover that it's not actually the way it ought to be. So for us, the first time we have seen the real rehabilitation and real work going on in that refinery was what started happening somewhere around 2021. That clearly the value of that refinery today has increased, but all we want is that government must bring about NLNG model in the operation and maintenance of that refinery, because NLNG had worked, and we strongly believe that this will also work. This has been our advocacy for at least 20 years.
Mr. Osifo, as we begin to wind down, let's talk about what has been personal concern for me, and that is the production output of our sector. Annualized 2024 should be about 1.3. Annualized 2025 should be about 1.34. 2025, 1.4. I'm talking about crude oil, not condensate, in terms of production output, based on the number that's been released by the NUPLC. And this is critical because it's our biggest earner in terms of foreign exchange. And we're grateful for the numbers we're seeing. Even though it's a managed float, we're seeing the Naira is gaining strength. We're talking about less than 1,400. So there's stability. On the other hand, we also have high interest rate. But my question is, from your expert point of view, why is it difficult for us to increase our production output?
Yes, very, very, very valid question, Jeffrey. Thank you so much. Before now, the major challenge that we've had in the Niger Delta is actually because of the pipeline vandalization. So that grossly has affected the output, because a lot of companies that are operating in that region, they started shutting in their production. Like my company, for example, Total Energies, company that I work for, we in one of our fields in Obagi, we literally we produce. Then when we produce crude, we take the gas out, we inject the crude back into the well because there was no use putting the crude into the pipeline and it will not get to its destination. So we were reinjecting the crude back into the well while exporting the gas. So a lot of companies that were operating in the onshore and shallow water, that was exactly what they were doing. So that literally brought down our production. But today, thank God, you know, the pipeline have almost 98% integrity today. The crude are flowing, so that has actually contributed to the output level that we are seeing. Yes, correct. Today, Nigeria as a country with about 37 billion barrels of proven reserves, we have no business doing about 1.5 million barrels of crude per day. Nigeria as a country, we should be projecting to hit somewhere around 3 million barrels per day. Do we have the right technology? The answer is yes. But the challenge as of today is, I mean, they are largely due to one, investment. Because a lot of the companies that have the financial wherewithal to start developing new fields, today they are divesting from onshore and shallow offshore and moving towards the deep water. That is actually the direction that they are going today. So now, you've heard what Shell has said in Bonga Southwest and Bonga North. You've also heard as well Total Energies the new investments that they are going into. So it's actually investment. When with the right investment, we have the proven reserves that we could use in increasing our production. Then secondly as well, the marginal fields. You know, licenses have been given out recently to a lot of marginal field operators. But what we have advocated as Pengasan is that give the licenses to people that have both the financial muscles as well as the technical capacity to be able to bring the crude beneath the soil to the surface. Because there's no use in giving out licenses to portfolio investors or to people who literally does not have the technical ability and may not even have the financial muscle. You know, the crude, the oil and gas business is very, very expensive business. Right. I mean, to rent a rig in deep water, at times, you may spend over $1 million per day. And you will keep this rig at times in the field for over 3 to 4 months. So it's a very expensive business that we all know about. So before you give out licenses, you must be sure that the financial and the technical ability are there. So currently, the IOCs, most of them, you heard what happened to Shell. They divested their JV, SPDC, sold to Renaissance. You heard what happened to ENI, Ajib. They sold their JV operations largely. They sold to Oando. The same thing also happened ExxonMobil. You know, they broke into two. I mean, they had the ESSO now, and they have sold the JV part of their investment. They sold to Seplat. So Seplat, Renaissance may not have the kind of financial capacity that their principals have. So what that means is that in a particular field, if you are producing crude after about 4, 5, 6, 8 years, you need to drill some other wells. You need to carry out a lot of activities, stimulation, well prep to enhance the well and improve the performances of the well. But these are capital intensive, and it becomes a challenge. That was why when government was passing PIA, our advocacy as Pengasan, then we had meetings with all the principal officers in National Assembly. We had meetings up to, I mean, the ad hoc committee chair, trying to advocate, trying to let them understand that, see, what we could do as a country is that we must incentivize production. Don't look at the quick wins that you are going to get today from PIA. No, look at the long-term strategic plan. What are those things that we are going to do today in order to bring investment? Because crude literally is found almost everywhere in Africa today. Before now, you could count Nigeria, you count Angola, count Congo, count very few Gabon, and very few countries. But today, literally everywhere. You go to Ghana, you go to Senegal, you go to Cote d'Ivoire. There is crude literally everywhere.
Oh, comrade.
So, okay.
Pardon me, I know this is a very important conversation because it's like the lifeblood of our economy, and it's interesting the way you've laid out the issues. And you are in a very interesting position because you not only, I mean, speak for our natural resources, right, crude oil, you also speak for human resources as well. So I think you kind of wear those caps very efficiently, which is why we're going to wind down with this question. Some have said this is a perfect time to renegotiate Nigeria's minimum wage of 70,000 naira in the build-up to elections. This is when you can get government's commitment, but more importantly, the economic situation, right? How would someone earning 70,000 naira monthly be able to afford accommodation, feeding? If you have children, you send them to school all the way. So is that conversation going to happen? And what are we looking at, comrade, as we wind down?
Yes, for us, really, that was why we started talking about living wage. If you remember the last minimum wage conversation we had, we started talking about living wage. How would the wage that a Nigerian worker actually earn, how would that wage be able to take care of the things that you have listed? The basic necessity of life, housing, food, clothing. How will this be able to take care of them? So that was actually our conversation. And that was one of the reasons. Even when the 70,000 naira came, for us, it was abysmally poor. But with government saying that, okay, instead of every 5 years, we have to bring it down. We have to bring it down to 3 years. And that 3 years is next year. But if you look at our New Year message from TUC, for example, we are pushing government. And we are having some conversations with them, trying to make them understand, yes, we have the minimum wage. Yes, the minimum wage is supposed to be someone on grade level 1, step 1. Which means the very basics. So that means someone who has a school certificate is supposed to be in grade level 4. While minimum wage of 70,000 is grade level 1, step 1, really in the civil service, there's nobody actually in grade level 1, step 1. So if with secondary certificate, which they normally employ the minimum person from or with, you are supposed to start from grade level 4. But as we said, the challenge was it. Even that minimum of 70,000, most of the states did not apply the consequential adjustment properly. If the consequential adjustment was applied properly, someone in grade level 4 would have been earning close to about 200,000 naira plus today. That means with secondary school certificate, you start work today, you will be earning 200,000 naira plus. But what we have done from TUC is that we are pushing government that, okay, even before the next minimum wage conversation takes place next year, you must provide for economic adjustment allowance. So all the workers, both in state and the federal government, there must be a cushioning allowance in order to cushion the effect of the harsh economic environment before we get to next year where the minimum wage conversation will take place again.
How much is the cushioning allowance?
For us, we are proposing 200,000 naira.
Aside the 70,000 naira? Or
yes, yes, it's an allowance, it's a proposal from us, because government will always tell you that it's a bit easier to pay allowances because it doesn't go to pension, it doesn't go to other factors that the salaries goes into. So that is why we're actually pushing this to see where it could end. So we'll be having a meeting with them very soon to further the conversation.
And we'll be following that conversation. We have to thank you so much, Comrade Festus Osifo, for your time, and wish you the very best as always.
Thank you, Coyote. Thank you, Jeffrey. Have a great day.
We'll take a quick break now. When we return, the City Boy movement is next on our lineup. What is it about? Find out in a moment.